So in this video, I'm going to talk to you about the difference between safety and compliance. When I used to do audits of motor carriers, and I did thousands of audits on motor carriers about their safety and compliance program, there was confusion about the difference between the two. So compliance is doing the paperwork, doing the things that the FMCSA requires of a trucking company, like putting together driver files, putting together maintenance files, setting up the drug and alcohol program, setting up the clearinghouse program, completing the 2290s, completing the IFTA reports and the UCRs and things like that. That's not a safety program. So when I would go and do these audits, these companies did a fairly good job at the compliance part, and they thought they had a safety program. A safety program is putting in things that change driver behavior. That is the secret right there on a safety program. So some of those motor carriers I would look at and do an audit, they would have a safety program in which they had purchased a third-party solution to do like driver training videos and things like that, and they would have some written policies and procedures and different things, different elements of a safety program, but that's not really a safety program. So with safety, the only thing that you're trying to do from a safety perspective is change driver behavior. That's all it is. So the other thing that I would see with a motor carrier, and this has been the case on clients that we handle and all of those companies that I audited, they all follow the 80-20 rule. And the 80-20 rule is simple. 80% of their drivers rarely have a safety behavior problem. They may have one or two in a month, but nothing that's setting off bells and whistles. It's the 20% of the drivers that are always a problem. And as you're watching this, if you think about your drivers, you're probably going, yeah, I can think of the 20% that I'm always having problems with. And so in safety, what you're trying to do is fix the 20% and change the driver behavior. So as a safety director or an owner, you have a choice. You either can change the driver behavior and fix the problem, or you have to recruit the driver out of your operation. And that happens on certain occasions when a driver will tell you that they're uncoachable. And usually I get a sentence like this out of a driver. It's something like, listen, I've been driving 25 years and you ain't going to tell me how to drive. That tells me that driver is uncoachable because they're not willing to change the behaviors that are causing problems. A classic example on a safety program is making sure that you're coaching your drivers, you're doing curative training, you have write-ups of drivers, and the different elements to try to change the safety behavior. That's really all you're trying to do is to change that behavior. I'll give you a classic example of a driver that I was really struggling with. I had a driver that refused to wear their seatbelt. I'm not wearing my seatbelt. The secret to safety is figuring out the why. Talking to the driver and asking them, why will you not comply with whatever the behavior is I'm trying to get you to do? So in this case, the driver wouldn't wear their seatbelt. So I had to have a conversation with the driver to get to the why. So I go, well, driver, why won't you wear your seatbelt? And what he told me sort of surprised me. He had come from the eastern half of Europe, and he grew up not wearing a seatbelt ever in his life. He just never did. And so once I understood the why, then I could start working on trying to correct the behavior with the driver. And what I had to do was convince him to wear the seatbelt in the first place. And I live in Florida, and I had to tell him this story. I said, in the state of Florida, you can ride a motorcycle without a helmet. Seems sort of silly that we have a law that makes people wear seat belts if you can ride a motorcycle without a helmet. So sort of lighten it up a little bit with that. But I said, however, you have to wear a seatbelt because if you get a ticket, it's going to go under the unsafe basic. It's going to end up in you getting possibly going to court over it and trying to get it removed. And I have learned with safety that drivers really don't care how it affects the company. They care about how it affects themselves. So in that case, I had to talk about the pre-employment screening report. This driver had no idea what the pre-employment screening report even was. So I had to explain what that report was. And just real quick, I call it the driver credit report. It has a report that has all of the violations that the driver receives over the last 3 years and all the accidents in the last 5 years. And it really can bar a driver from gaining employment. And why is that? More and more motor carriers are using pre-employment screening reports to use when they're hiring drivers, and if they see a bunch of violations on that report, they just tell the driver, listen, I'm not going to be able to hire you here because of this or that. So when I explained it to this driver and I said, look, I know you grew up without wearing a seatbelt, and I know that if you get a ticket, it's going to end up on your pre-employment screening report, and that's going to be negative points on your driving record there. And it's going to be difficult if you get a bunch of violations for you to drive commercially. Then I had to go the next step to actually change the driver behavior. So what did I have to do is I had to have a dash camera in the truck that was facing the driver. And I had to watch the video after we had that discussion and catch him wearing his seatbelt. So that's different than catching a driver not wearing their seatbelt, because if I did that, he would still be not in a place to wear his seatbelt. So I actually had to convince him to wear the seatbelt, catch him on the camera to wear the seatbelt, and then I was able to get him to wear the seatbelt going forward. Yeah, it took a lot of time. And yes, it made a positive impact on the driver. Well, the interesting thing happened after that is I had to watch this driver for a couple of weeks, not 24/7, but just spot check the driver. I knew he was running at a certain time, and I would catch him wearing the seatbelt, and I would call him up driving, and I would go, driver, just want to let you know you're doing a great job on wearing your seatbelt. I really appreciate it. I'm glad we got this problem solved. But the interesting thing that happened is he then went to the other drivers at our terminal lot for that operation and said, hey, safety is watching us. They are making sure that we're wearing the seatbelt. And he talked to the other drivers. He was my safety advocate at that point to tell the other drivers, listen, safety's watching. You got to wear your seatbelt. And guess what? We didn't have any more seatbelt issues with that operation going forward just because of that's the way it's handled. So let's put in safety as a whole of what it's all about. You can't do safety if you don't know what the problems are. So the first thing that an operation needs to do is they have to have cameras in the trucks. It's the cheapest safety director you can put in the truck. They have to be forward facing and they have to be driver facing. If you think about your unsafe basic score, your unsafe driving basic score, you can't fix drivers holding cell phones, texting while driver, not wearing their seatbelt, distracted driving, and those type of things if you cannot see the driver behavior. You just can't. There's just no way to fix unsafe driving. So if your insurance company is getting on to you because your unsafe driving is out of control and you don't have driver facing and forward facing cameras in there, you're never going to fix that problem. The same with the electronic logging device. If your operation has an electronic logging device and you don't look at the data from the dashboard every day to figure out what the driver behavior is, you're never going to fix it. So the first step on a good safety program is having the tools in the truck to monitor what the driver behavior is. If you don't have any of that, you really don't have a safety program. There's just no way to identify driver behavior problems if you're not monitoring it. The second thing is in safety is you've got to do something with that data. So it's one thing to notice a driver is not wearing their seatbelt today and talking to them today or tomorrow at the latest. It's a totally different thing is if you go in once a month and then you talk to the driver at the end of the month. You've already had so much bad driver behavior in the month that you can't handle it and it doesn't have any meaning to the driver. So the way that I suggest that you handle safety to correct driver behavior, that's all we're trying to do with safety is correct the driver behavior, is look at the cameras every day, determine what the driver behavior issues that you need to deal with, whether it's speeding, seatbelt, cell phones, whatever. Look at the electronic logging device dashboard every day, figure out what's going on there. You know, do you have form and manner issues? Are they not putting trailers in? Are they not putting shipments in? Do they not take their 30-minute break properly? Are they going over their 11 and 14 hours? Are they using PC incorrectly? You're identifying driver behavior that needs to be fixed. That's the secret to all of this. So you've got to look at it every day. You got to have the tools installed, look at it every day, and then you've got to act on it. And this is where the struggle is with safety folks, with motor carriers. I get it. You're putting out fires all day. You're trying to handle an accident. You're trying to figure out what's going on with maintenance. You're trying to figure out what's going on with the hours of service rules or your basic scores and the bosses on you and all that. But you have to figure out how to get to the safety portion of monitoring and responding to the driver behavior. So the way that I do it is we have automatic coaching on driver behavior. So we have the dash camera and the electronic logging device coming in to us, and we identify the problems. Then we have automatic coaching that goes out to the drivers. And the idea on the coaching of the drivers as an automatic way of handling it is, again, the 80% of the drivers that are not a real problem, you can hit them with one or two coaching events. They'll look at it. They'll respond back, oh, man, I didn't realize I was doing that. And those drivers generally will fix themselves. So it doesn't take a whole lot of your time. The 20% of the drivers, that's where you're going to spend most of your time trying to get them to comply with whatever. So having that, having some curative training, writing up your drivers, the write-ups are more of a discussion, not a disciplinary action, not a I got you. It's trying to get to the why. Driver, why do you keep having this behavior? Then giving them your expectations of I need you to do 1, 2, and 3 to correct the behavior, and the driver signing off on it saying, okay, boss, I understand what you're asking me to do. I'm going to try to do better at this. Or the other one is the 1 to 2 drivers that you have that will just say, I'm not going to do that. Then you got to make a business decision to recruit that driver out of your operation. That's really what it's all about, is identifying those drivers who just are not going to do this. That is the secret to safety, is making sure that you get in that data, you understand what driver behaviors that you have to deal with, dealing with those behaviors quickly, having the tools in place, and just having a system in place that you can deal with that driver behavior in real time, and then just rinse and repeat. I see so many motor carriers that will, buy or hire a third-party service that says, okay, we got these great training videos. The drivers will watch the training videos. It's not effective. It really isn't. You've got to drill down to the actual driver behavior. So if you have a driver that won't wear their seatbelt, but you deliver them a 30-minute video about defensive driving or distracted driving or something like that, they're really not going to get of what you're trying to get after. So, I mean, when I went in and did an audit, I would have a safety director saying, oh, yeah, we give them these videos to watch and all that. But it didn't correct the driver behavior. Their unsafe driving was still really high, or their hours of service was really high, or their vehicle maintenance was high. It wasn't helping the operation to solve the problem. So think about this when you're working with your safety program. You're spending a lot of time on the compliance piece, making sure your driver files, maintenance files, and other things are perfect, but you're probably not doing as good a job on the safety piece that can really change the driver behavior to make your operation a whole lot safer. So I hope these tips help with understanding the difference between compliance and safety. And I really want you to think about putting in the dash cameras, making sure you're checking the dashboards of that camera and the electronic logging device, and setting up your system for success on that you're able to do it on a regular basis to change that driver behavior. Anyway, you guys be safe out there, and I hope this helps.